thinking that jacket was so cool. It's a velvet jacket, if anyone's wondering.
I mean,
Vanilla.
very
Vanilla.
And I'm in a
Business is specifically for people who
that's
feel,
like a co-working space that I was in. That wasn't my actual office. Your role.
most people will see a financial planner because they want to learn more about super or invest some money. But ultimately what they really want is to have an easier lifestyle. How do we get enough money?
I don't think this is
in the
bad. What do you guys think?
12 months.
It's not that
All
cringy.
the things that we really want in the process. Breaking it down to a level in which we can really quantify how we can increase our clients' wealth and how much of an impact we can have on their lives. I like to see people grow. I like to see businesses grow. I like to see relationships grow. Increasing clients' wealth is what we do every day, and we love it.
And it ends with a guide. So that was it. It was actually 11 years ago, almost to the day this video was published. If you're wanting to find out any advisor that you've worked with, and you can actually see someone's qualifications. You can see how long they've been advising. You can see where they've been advising. And it's really helpful to actually see that, to make sure your advisor you're speaking to is referenced.
I got talking to someone the other day that had mentioned that they had a previously less than optimal experience with a prior financial advisor. The guy up on the register just out of curiosity, and he had actually been banned. The point of that is, it is actually a really good resource. You will know if the person you're speaking to has had any issues. We could go through disciplinary actions as well, which is quite interesting. So, it is worth doing that extra level of due diligence. Look the advisor up. They might be registered, everything might be current, but you can also see whether they've had any past issues on the record. So different retirement planning strategies, or what common ways that people start to access their super can be. The really common questions I get, or maybe even common misconceptions that I get. Retirement age, Scott, when is it?
The official government figure is age 67 is when you're eligible to receive the age pension.
Mm-hmm.
But you're actually, assuming you've got appropriate, sufficient and thorough financial planning, you are able to access your superannuation balance at age 60. So there's a 7-year gap there between when you can access your super balance.
The question of when can I retire? I mean, ultimately, whenever the hell you can afford it. There is no official retirement age. The number 67 is purely when you can access the age pension.
What I like to actually focus on is predominantly you'll want to be spending the same amount of money in retirement than you are at the moment. I find most of our clients, when we speak to them, they might be earning, I don't know, just pick a dollar amount. Let's say it's $100,000 a year as a combined family. And they say, I want to have that same amount in retirement because when I do retire, I'm going to want to do more travel. I want to hang with my grandkids. I might have some more health expenses. I want to do some renovations, whatever it is. Pretty common. So that's really the target that we'll focus on, which is you're able to retire when your assets are in a position to generate your required income for life. That's the point. You can then retire.
Common thing that we see for most people is that they take what's called an account-based pension. Very simply, that is transferring your current super fund, which is in an account called an accumulation account, from there to an account-based pension. When you retire and you move your money to an account-based pension, those earnings are now tax-free. So, that often represents somewhere around a 1% uplift to your investment returns, purely because you're not giving any to our good friends at the ATA. Nice benefit. You can also then start to draw an income. And in fact, you have to. There are minimum amounts based on your age that you must draw every year if you're in one of those accounts.
We'll call it between 4 and 5%. If you've got, say, $200,000, you must take out, we'll call it 10 grand a year minimum. So you've got $400,000, you've got to take a minimum of 20 grand a year. Theoretically, if I put $50,000 and I compounded it at 28% over 27 years, do you want to take a guess how much money that would be worth? You can give it away. It's some silly number. So if we put 50 grand in and it compounds at 28%, it becomes worth, drum roll, $54 million.
Pretty comfortable retirement.
It's kind of interesting because the difference is because it goes to year 10, 586,000. At year 20, 6.9 million. And then 7 years later, 54 million.
I mean, sure. Compounding is great.
What I found was quite interesting about this was ChatGPT gave me every single warning it possibly could around being mindful about not getting scammed. It was like, this is highly risk, and it doesn't talk to you about the liquidity. It doesn't talk to you about the fees. It doesn't talk to you about the past record. It doesn't talk to you about if you're a wholesaler, sophisticated investor. When it comes to building appropriate portfolios that are that are not silly. We did some more research, and then we looked at the FAAA, which is the Financial Planning Association of Australia, and they say a normal return for a growth fund should be around about 7% over a 10-year time frame.
Look, everyone's scenario is going to be different. So there's no right or wrong answer here. It's going to be an individual thing. But what I will say is for a lot of the people we speak to, probably the majority, the tax benefits of salary sacrificing to super are going to be near impossible to beat. If you think about the fact that you're saving, maybe if you pay a bit extra off your mortgage, you're saving maybe 5-6% interest. But, for most people, salary sacrifice to super is probably saving them somewhere in the vicinity of 17% tax for that same money. So assuming you're earning $100,000 a year and you're not doing any salary sacrifice and you're getting standard contributions, your employer's putting about $11,500 a year into your super. You are allowed to put $30,000 a year into your super that carries a tax benefit. So employer contributions or salary sacrifice. Get into my little little calculator here. So I've got 100 grand at the moment. You're paying, if you're earning 100 grand a year after Medicare levy, you're paying about $22,788 to the government. If I get up $10,000 of my salary, which is $192 a week. Now my taxable salary drops down to $90,000. My taxable income, my personal taxable income has now reduced by $3,200. So instead of paying $22,788, I'm paying $19,500, just over $19,500. Not bad. Now, as I mentioned, it is still going to be taxed going into super. So you're going to pay about $1,500 tax on that contribution into super. But the net benefit there is you've now reduced the tax that you have paid by $1,700. That might not sound huge, but if you think about that over 20 years of a working life, that is massive.
But the difference is that you're effectively foregoing that money being paid into your own personal bank account, and that money is being paid into your super fund. And you're getting a tax benefit of, in this scenario, $356 in this one specific pay cycle. And that makes a huge difference from a compounding perspective. But the thing is, you've got to make sure that you're managing your household expenses in the short term for that medium to long-term benefit of the tax saving.
People get concerned that is this now going to be $52,000 a year of income that's going to be assessed against me when I apply for the age pension? And the answer to that question is no. And it's when you actually stop and think about the reasons why, and I'll explain it in a minute, it actually makes sense that this is not assessable income. And the reason it's not assessable income, despite the fact we call it an income stream and you're receiving an income, is because it's actually a return of your capital. If you think about, if I put $100 into my bank account and a week later I withdraw that $100, I've not received $100 of income. I've just drawn $100 of my own money. And the principle is exactly the same with your super. I might have put $400,000 into an account-based pension. If I want to draw $52,000 a year out of that, that is just me withdrawing my own money. That is not income that I'm receiving. Therefore, it is not an assessable asset or not an assessable income for Centrelink age pension purposes. What happens if you retire 1 year earlier? Oof. We've gone from having our $73,000 all the way out to 105 years of age to actually running out of super by age 79, just from 1 year difference at work. That tells me if anything happens in markets that doesn't get that, average 6.7% return, or you have an unexpected expense, your medical expenses are higher than you planned for, something happens earlier and you've got to retire earlier, you have no margin for error there. So this is probably to Scott's point where more is better. This assumes your mortgage is paid off by retirement. And to be honest, we don't see that often anymore. If I pull money out of super to clear that mortgage so you can retire debt-free, now we've got another huge problem. You're out of super by 68. Yeah.
So what does we add plus 3 years?
Now we're fully funded right out to 105 years old. Now, and the other interesting thing is you can see this is our $73,000 a year line here. Our income bars are actually going above that later in life. And the reason for that is A, your age pension's increased. B, the minimums that you must draw from your super, they increase as you get older. So the amount of income you're being forced to draw later in life under this scenario actually exceeds the $73,000 a year anyway. There's
a few things you can do to take control of it. One of those things is to just be mindful of, if you can stomach it, 3 extra years, the 3 years from age 64 to 67, if you can hang in there, makes a massive difference at the top end. Seeing what you can do around your investment mix at retirement, huge difference as well. And a final point is putting together a plan for yourself about what you want to do in the years leading up to it. We do see people, they'll take some time off, they'll take a lower paying job, or unfortunately, yeah, it is difficult to maintain that, maintain that higher income you might have been earning in your 50s. If you can continue it, do everything you possibly can. Or if you're willing to take a step back, maybe try and consider working out to age 70 if your balance is a little bit low. So those are 3 things to think about if you're getting into that age, and then just create a little plan for yourself. You will be in that position for 25 plus years. Having those 3 changes will make you feel more optimistic about your retirement. It's going to be a wonderful time if you do it well and get into it, enjoy it, prepare for it, and plan for it.
Eligibility age, same preservation age for super and all that sort of thing. But the reality is the majority of women, or the average life expectancy for a woman today is 85 years old. And for a man, it's only 81.
I'm not happy about that, Phil. I don't like that. I want to live longer. 60 is the official age that you can access your superannuation. I don't know where this has started. I think it started somewhere online and it's just gaining traction. And to clarify, preservation age means the age you can access your superannuation and retire. And what that means is you will write a letter to your superannuation fund, and you will write a letter or fill in a form, and you would say, hey, it's my 60th birthday today. I would like to please have some of my superannuation. You will submit that form, and then they will confirm your identity via an ID check. And then you can withdraw either a lump sum or an ongoing pension from your superannuation account via an account-based pension.
This topic does come up a lot. We get asked about it a lot because preservation age has been progressively changing. So it used to be 55. So a lot of people still have that stuck in their heads. Progressively changed based on your date of birth, but now everybody is preservation age is 60. Preservation age doesn't necessarily mean retirement. You can go and start ripping your super out. It means you've got access to it, but how much you can access depends on what's going on in your life. Look, the reality is once you're over 60, you've reached preservation age. Preservation age does not mean you automatically have access to super, but it means you're of an age where you can start ticking boxes that may give you access. So I'll give you the quick nuts and bolts, the high level version, but once you're over 60, you can meet a definition of retirement by leaving an arrangement of employment. So I've left my job. I've left an arrangement of employment. I can now tick that box on the form to say, yes, I want to take a lump sum from my super or start an account-based pension, retirement pension, start taking some income. I can do that by a transition to retirement pension. So I put some of my super in there and I can start to draw on that. I can take one lump sum a year, or I can take fortnightly payments, whatever. It doesn't matter. But the maximum I can take is 10% of the balance at the start of the financial year. So if I put $200,000 in there, I can take a maximum of $20,000 that financial year. There are some differences between a transition to retirement pension and a retirement pension as well. In any case, if you're taking withdrawals from your superannuation over 60, no matter how you've met the definition, they're always going to come to you tax-free. So that's cool, no issues. But the difference between a transition to retirement account and a retirement account or retirement pension, and the reason you want to try and get into a retirement pension if you can, is because the retirement pension does not pay tax on earnings. Transition to retirement account still pays 15% tax on earnings, the same as your accumulation account would. That's a lovely one the government brought in for us a few years back as well.
One of the mistakes a lot of our clients will be making post-retirement, just going through those first crucial 5 years of once you've hit the point and you're out, what happens, and some things to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I think look, at me a bit of surprise when you've woken up every day for the last 30 years and gotten out of bed and jumped in the car and driven to work, and all of a sudden you jump out of bed and you got nowhere to go. Things can probably be a bit different, maybe in ways you don't really expect. It's an interesting one. Often I'll come to people come to me with a retirement budget, more often than not with no retirement budget. And it's not always that well considered, I'd probably say. Scott, do you find the same thing?
Those first couple of weeks are probably the best ever, because now you've got superannuation drawings through the pension and you're not working. But probably week 3 or 4, but probably like week 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 is kind of when reality kind of sticks in and kind of kicks in. That's sort of my view on it. What's your view?
Yeah, well, look, I think where sometimes I see this go wrong is that people don't probably really understand how much extra time they're going to have and the effect that that can have on maybe what your expected budget is. And actually, like, this is even something that caught me out when I went from working in an office full-time to working from home full-time. Yes, some of my expenses decreased. I wasn't spending $250 a bloody fortnight on train tickets anymore. But, now I'm sitting at home and it's 40 degrees and I'm running the aircon every day. So, my power bill is much bigger than it used to be. So, things like that will catch you out. You're probably out for lunch more with your friends, more coffees, more shows, more dinners, all these kind of things that maybe when you sit there and you look at your pre-retirement budget aren't accounted for, that you may find happening when you got some more time on your hands in retirement. But the spending more than expected, it is a common retirement problem. There's a lot of people, when they sit down and work out their spending, think about what they're going to spend in retirement, they think about, food, bills, medical, all the basics. But we all forget that, we're driving a 6-year-old car around that probably going to need to be replaced in the next couple of years. The roof might need some work done. The house might need painting, all these sort of things that can add up to kind of lumpy expenses. So, it is worthwhile trying to factor in those sort of, all the things around the house you've been wanting to do for 20 years that you've been putting off. They're going to come at a cost. And that's not to say you shouldn't do them, but factor that into your budget. Your medical expenses are probably going to be higher. Your health insurance is definitely going to spike as you get older. All these little things that are probably going to be more expensive than you realize. So be realistic with your budget. I had someone the other day that came in with a retirement budget of $100,000 a year, which was actually a bloody healthy budget. That's what they estimated, but they went away and actually did a line by line budget and they were out by $50,000. Retirement planning and what you do with your money when you get to retirement is 100% needs to be about you first. So it's that old adage that we hear trotted out all the time: put your own oxygen mask on before you put anyone else's on. All right. So that's my first thought. If you can afford to do it and everything else is taken care of and you want to spoil the grandkids, fine, go nuts. But also, man, as a parent, I don't want them spoiled too. So I got enough crap.
Yeah, look, we've worked so hard. We've done everything right. We've worked with you as a client. We've built up your superannuation balance. You're flying. And then you hit the go button, you hit retirement. And then 2 years in, you're just like, oh, they've turned 18. We're going to pay for their trip to Europe. Okay, well, they've got a car. Or maybe they hit their car, or maybe they want to move to Sydney. Look, the best thing you can possibly do in our view is give them the time and love that we all do.
Yep.
I'm going to flag it, which is if it's a genuine importance, include it in the budget. But we've got to remember this is a 30-year time frame. We've just touched on how inflation can hurt, health costs can hurt. It's pretty easy to keep traveling, and then now we're starting to give kids Anyway, I'm flagging it. I don't want to labor it anymore, but it's a thing.
Yeah, look, it touches on a really important point though, and something else I've seen a lot, and that is, particularly when I worked for the government super fund, and there was a lot of old defined benefit accounts around that were worth quite a lot of money. And I'd have some clients that they'd been working for the government for 40 years, and maybe they were only, they were earning $70,000 a year, something like that. So they've had $70,000 a year to live off for all this time. But because they'd been there for so long in such a good scheme, they get to retirement and all of a sudden they're a millionaire overnight because you've got this massive, defined benefit that's just become available to you. And it's a real psychological shift because you've gone, shit, I've had $70,000 a year to live off all these years. And now effectively I've won lotto, I've got $1 million that I can start to play with. And you've got to remember that, yes, it's a big pot of money, but it's got to last a bloody long time. So don't fall into that trap of I can afford it, I've got heaps of money, because yes, it's heaps of money, but it's got to last a long time. Women kind of face in relation to superannuation that aren't, traditionally a problem for men. It's not just the fact that they're likely to live longer, but also you think, in our household's a prime example. My wife's had years out of the workforce at home with the kids, and that's pretty common, and that's a common thing for a lot of women. They lose, and quite often in peak earning years, those sort of ages where they kind of are going up the ladder and that sort of thing, and then it can be harder to get back on that ladder later, so it lowers future income, or it can. So it's not uncommon for women to live longer, but have to do it off a lower starting balance.
Australian Bureau of Statistics, the average retirement age for men in 2024, 2025, which is the most recent stats. For men, it's 64.9, which is a bit of a random one. So we'll call it 65 on the nose. But for women, 62.7. So it's about 3 years, two and a half to 3 years difference. Those final 2 years make a huge difference to your retirement balance. The idea of living overseas is incredibly alluring because let's say we go to Malaysia, let's say we get to go to Dubai or wherever else, and oh wow, less taxes, it's going to be amazing. I live in Aussie, I pay so much tax. The reality is that there's probably three key issues that that we see clients coming unstuck with pretty quickly. The first one is bureaucracy. You're dealing with the Australian superannuation system taxes, and now you're dealing with another version of another government's bureaucracy. So you've actually just doubled your bureaucratic layer. But at the same time, you are having to manage multi-jurisdiction layers. The second thing is healthcare costs. If you are in your prime retirement years, which we'll call 63 to 75, something like that, things are looking pretty good. You're probably drawing down your super, you're probably feeling pretty healthy, you're probably doing the travel. But usually, if you are in any of those Southeast Asian countries or in the Emirates, wherever it is, you still need to pay independent health insurance. So you've actually got quite high healthcare costs baked in that instantly offset the tax benefits. And if you're in a superannuation pension phase, you're actually not paying any tax anyway. So what you're doing is you're actually almost worse off because you're in a foreign country where you're paying private health insurance. And the final point here is the lifestyle creep that occurs.
If you are considering, particularly retiring overseas or something like that, there's a bit of maybe like a decision filter you should apply. Sit down and just ask yourself sort of these 5 questions and see how it aligns with you. So first one would be, do I like uncertainty and admin? There is a level of uncertainty going to live in an unfamiliar country, unfamiliar laws, new bureaucracy, as Scott keeps mentioning. And there's going to be admin. You're going to be doing paperwork, visas, bloody God knows what, depending on where you live. Second question would be, how often do I realistically think I'm going to be coming back to Australia? If you still got family, grandkids, whatever that you're going to want to visit, and how often is that going to happen? You need to factor that into the budget. 3, what's the healthcare plan and what's plan B? So, if something goes wrong in another country, it is going to cost you more money. You may have to get home in a hurry, but if it's an emergency or something, you've got to be medevaced or whatever, that's going to cost you a bomb. You're not going to have your pensioners concession card. So think about it. Think about it carefully and plan for it, because, the reality is, if you are considering retiring in another country, you are older and you are likely to experience more healthcare costs, even in your own country, let alone somewhere else. 4, have I cooked up this budget based off, what I spent on holidays once in 1989? Or is this actually realistic, what I'm going to be spending in the real world living in another country? And the last one, what happens if the exchange rates really move?
So what this is saying here is that if we look at what the exchange rates look like today, €1 is buying $1 and 17 cents. Before they were about parity, but what you've seen here is you've seen this real movement away from the value of the US dollar. So what this means is the US has lost about 17% of its purchasing power against the euro. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, it is. It's introducing another layer of risk to your retirement portfolio. We all think about the obvious thing of market risk and what happens if you have a crash, but you're also introducing that currency risk, which you have in your super anyway, but it's a bit more real when you're actually spending foreign dollars. So Definitely something else to think about. I find people might get it wrong is that, when they think about the budget of what they're going to spend week to week in, Philippines, Vietnam, wherever, Thailand, they think about it through the context of I went there for a 4-week holiday and my food cost was next to nothing. But the realities of going for a holiday and and actually funding living expenses are going to be pretty different. Like you mentioned, like healthcare costs are definitely something that could get pretty significant. Like, you might, if it's just something pretty simple, well, sure, you could fly home and sort it out under Australia's very generous healthcare system. But what if it's not? What if it's something like some sort of emergency that lands you in hospital and stuck there for a while? That is going to run you a massive bill. So things like that can be pretty frightening. Maybe you have to do visa runs. Maybe the country you're in, you can't stay in for longer than X amount of time and you got to do a visa run here or there. So you got flight costs. Like Scott mentioned, lifestyle creep, flying back and forward. And then think about things like age pension as well. Like you've got some considerations there.
Now, I give famously practical gifts. For example, the entire family got stick vacuum cleaners a couple of years ago, and it was quite the hit. Everyone uses them.
A big theme for me this year, just the benefit of hindsight, I suppose, and what things could have been done to potentially avoid some issues. So that's probably my hot take from this year, and a lot of the people I've spoken to is probably get advice earlier than you think you need to. Whether that's financial advice, accounting advice, whatever. Because sometimes by the time all the work's done, it's too late.
Well, I mean, yeah, I should say gratitude. Thank you so much if you're listening to this podcast. We've had really a great growth, and obviously we've hit a nerve, and it's been a pretty. I would say it's been a pretty wild year for both of us from fairly humble beginnings. I mean, the business structure hasn't changed that much since 2020 when I set it up, but the team's 3 times bigger than it was 2 years ago.
Yep.
And we've got, a professional year advisor, Dan, who's starting on the 14th of January. He's been with us for 12 months in like a junior role, but he's now going to be stepping up and he'll be a fully fledged advisor, which is great. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe. Do send this to someone if you think they would benefit from our advice, because that has been a wonderful point of referral as well.
Thanks very much for watching. And everyone that's booked in and had a chat with me, really appreciate your time, and look forward to meeting a lot more of you in the new year.